Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into two incredibly different diplomatic events that, believe it or not, happened on the very same day, January 18th, 2026. And taken together, they really do paint a wild picture of American foreign policy.
All right, so let's jump right in. This whole thing kicks off with a pretty wild statement from President Trump that sent, well, shockwaves across the globe. He made it crystal clear. The U.S. wanted Greenland. And this wasn't just some real estate deal. It was a matter of national security.
And believe me, this wasn't just talk. In January of 2026, things got very real, very fast. A diplomatic crisis over this massive Arctic island just exploded, escalating with incredible speed. What started as a pretty standard military exercise, well, it turned into something way, way bigger.
I mean, just look at how fast this all went down. 4 days ago, you've got European allies doing routine exercises in Greenland. Totally normal stuff. A day later, Russia complains. Again, pretty predictable. But then, bam! 2 days ago, the U.S. completely flips the script and issues an ultimatum to its own allies, backed by a massive economic threat.
And let's be super clear about what was on the table here. This wasn't a request for more base access or some new treaty. No. The United States was explicitly, publicly demanding that Denmark hand over control of its own autonomous territory. The argument? It was an absolute necessity for American security. So when diplomatic pressure didn't get the job done, the United States decided to pull out the big guns, pure economic muscle. And this wasn't some subtle hint whispered behind closed doors, it was a loud public threat. The plan was spelled out with, let's say, punishing clarity. Step 1, you target a whole group of key European allies. Step 2, you slap them with a 10% tariff on everything. And if that doesn't work, Step 3, an automatic jump to a really painful 25% just a few months down the line. So what was the official justification for all this? Well, it was blunt, to say the least. The argument coming from the administration was basically that Denmark is just too small, too weak to properly defend a place as big and strategic as Greenland. Therefore, they just couldn't be trusted with it. But here's where it gets really interesting. You'd think a move this bold would have some major backing at home, right? Wrong. A Reuters/Ipsos poll from that time found that this whole gambit had shockingly little support. Only 17% of Americans actually approved of trying to acquire Greenland. Okay, so you've got this immense pressure, this direct economic threat hanging over Europe. What happens next? Do they cave? Absolutely not. In fact, what happened was a show of remarkable and very swift unity. French President Emmanuel Macron did not mince words. He came out immediately and called the American tactics what they were: unacceptable threats. That really set the tone for the rest of the continent. And he wasn't alone. Sweden's Prime Minister, Ulf Kristersson, used even stronger language. He framed it as economic blackmail, saying flat out, "We will not let ourselves be blackmailed." Pretty strong stuff. Then you have the UK's Keir Starmer, who pointed out the central, kind of bizarre contradiction here. He basically asked, why on earth are you punishing your allies for taking part in military exercises that are supposed to make all of us safer? It's a fair question.
And the pushback just kept coming. It was a chorus of condemnation. The EU Commission promised full solidarity. The Danish foreign minister said he was baffled since they'd been totally open with the US about the exercises. And then you had people hitting the streets in both Denmark and Greenland, all under one very clear slogan.
Okay, now I want you to hold that thought, because while all of this high-stakes drama is unfolding, on the very same day, something completely different is happening. It feels like a story from another diplomatic universe. And this is where the picture of U.S. foreign policy gets really, really complicated.
So while all the cameras and all the headlines are laser-focused on this Arctic drama, a much quieter, more conventional piece of diplomacy was wrapping up successfully, far away from the media spotlight.
Away from the public threats, away from the tariff announcements, you have this very traditional, high-level meeting happening down in Florida. It's the picture of normal diplomacy, the U.S. president and the Prime Minister of Slovakia sitting down for a talk.
And hey, this wasn't just some friendly chat or a photo op. It was the finish line for a really significant bilateral deal. Earlier that same day, officials from both countries had signed a formal agreement to cooperate on civilian nuclear energy. Now, this is a big deal. These kinds of agreements are complex. They're about technology, safety, non-proliferation. They're a sign of a deep, long-term partnership. So what's the big takeaway here?
On the exact same day, we saw two totally different American foreign policy approaches playing out at the same time. One was all about confrontation, and the other was all about cooperation.
And this just spells it out perfectly, doesn't it? On one hand, you've got the Greenland gambit: public threats, coercion, confrontation. On the other, the Slovakian handshake: private meetings, cooperation, partnership. It's like two different playbooks being used by the same administration. And that leaves us with this final, really provocative question. What are we actually seeing here? Is this just calculated chaos where every situation gets a wildly different, unpredictable response? Or is it a deliberate two-track plan, one that uses both the stick and the carrot to get what it wants? What this one day in January shows us is that on the world stage, the answer is anything but simple.